Hello, this is Mr. Polium, and welcome to the online module for how to use a graphic organizer. When completing this module, you are going to learn what graphic organizers are, how to use a graphic organizer, and how to apply using a graphic organizer when reading. The objective is how to use a graphic organizer to list events of a short story in correct sequence from start to end. This is an example of a graphic organizer when reading. This is called a story mountain. This is the graphic organizer that we will be focusing on today. As you can see, at the bottom of the mountain on the left side starts with the X position. It then goes up to the rising action, it peaks at the climax, and then it drops down with the falling action and the resolution. Let's take a look at the X position first. What is the X position? The X position is where you will write objects, ideas, characters, and settings for the story that you're reading. You then will move to the rising action. The rising action can have anywhere from one event to multiple events that leads to the climax of the story. After the events of the rising action that lead up to the climax is the big part that happens in the story. It's the main event that happens of the story. It usually happens in the middle. However, that's not always the case. After the climax, you then drop down to the falling action. This is where your event that happens after the big event, the main event that happened in the story, that leads to the resolution. And last but not least, the resolution. This is the very end of the story. This is how the story concludes or ends. Let's review what objects, ideas, characters, and setting are. You can see in this picture that we have different objects, which are many objects, in the background of what's happening. You might see a desk, a book, a bed, a messy room, an open window, and so much more. You then can maybe see ideas. For this example, you might see that this person is reading a story. For characters, you might or might not recognize that this is Harry Potter. So in this case, we only have one character, which is Harry Potter, as well as an animal that you can see in the far corner, which is an owl. The setting that takes place is wherever the event is happening. For this example, it is a bedroom. We're not sure if it's his bedroom, but we most likely can take a good guess that it is, considering he's sitting at the desk and the room is messy. Would you sit in a room that's really messy by yourself? Probably not, so we can conclude that this most likely is Harry Potter's room. However, we might not always have illustrations to make those calls. We might only have text. Go ahead and follow along with me as I read this short passage aloud. Tom opened the door, and Sparky, his dog, ran out the door. Tom did not know what to do. He called for help, but his family did not respond. They must still be at his sister's play. Thus, Tom had to walk the dark, cold roads alone to find his dog. Tom searched behind the trash can and had no luck. Tom turned around, and to his surprise, Tom's dog was sitting in the driveway. Tom took Sparky back inside, where they were safe. Tom and Sparky finished the night by watching a movie. Tom was so glad Sparky was found. So let's take a look at this text. Going back to using the graphic organizer, can we find out the events that took place in this short passage? We can say that the first event is Tom opens the door and Sparky, his dog, runs out. We then know that Tom did not know what to do and that he called for his family's help, but they didn't respond. This could be the second event. They must be still at his sister's play. He realizes that his parents are not in the house with him. This can be our third event. Tom had to walk the dark, cold roads alone to find his dog. This is the fourth event. Tom searched behind the trash can and had no luck. This is the fifth event. Tom turned around, and to his surprise, Tom's dog was sitting in the driveway. This is the sixth event. Tom took Sparky back inside where they were safe. Tom and Sparky finished the night by watching a movie. This is the seventh event. And lastly, which we could say is the resolution, Tom was so glad Sparky was found. Let's refer back to our Story Mountain graphic organizer. Again, we have the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Can we refer to the story and compare the events and write them on our graphic organizer in correct sequence, starting from the beginning to the end? Here's our story in the graphic organizer. Let's first take a look for the exposition. Remember that the exposition are the objects, the ideas, the setting, and the characters that take place in the story. You can see that highlighted in red are the characters and other things about the story that we can put in our exposition. So now we can write our exposition as you can see here. We have Tom and Sparky, which is the dog, that are characters. It's nighttime, it's cold, and we're at Tom's house. We can now place our first event, which is Tom opened the door and Sparky, his dog, ran out the door. We can now place our second event, which Tom did not know what to do. He called for help, but his family did not respond. Placing our third event, Tom had to walk the dark, cold roads alone to find his dog. Our next event would be Tom searched behind the trash can and had no luck. Our next event, Tom turned around and to his surprise, Tom's dog was sitting in the driveway. Now this can be considered as the climax, because Tom searched and searched for his dog, and finally the dog was right behind him on the driveway. This is the climax because the dog was finally found. Tom took Sparky back inside where they were safe. Tom and Sparky finished the night by watching a movie. This is our falling action. It's the event that occurs directly after the climax that leads to the resolution. Last but not least, Tom was so glad Sparky was found. Here is our resolution. It's the end of the story, and everything led up to Tom being happy that his dog was found. So let's review. What are graphic organizers? How do you use a graphic organizer? And can you apply it to using a graphic organizer when reading to order a sequence of events? Graphic organizers are organizers to use when you are 1. Looking to remember things, order things, or write things down to review at a later time. It's a way to organize your thoughts and your ideas. How do you use a graphic organizer? Well, today you learned to use a mountain, where we had an exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and then the resolution, which is how you applied it to using a graphic organizer when reading. We read a short passage. We looked through the passage and found all the events that took place, and then we ordered them from the exposition, and then the first event that took place, all the way to the resolution, which was the last event to take place. You did a great job today. Congratulations! This module is now completed. You are now ready to use a graphic organizer to list the events of a story in correct sequence. You can now practice this on your own.